This woman was only 18 days old when she experienced prison life. Yes, imagine an 18-day-old baby inside a prison cell. She was born into a country that already hated her. And when she became an adult, she was sent out of her own country, not because she committed any crime, but because she spoke the truth. Her voice was loud and fearless. She hated oppression. She fought for the rights of her people, and because of this, the world frustrated her. This is a tragic story of Miriam Makeba, the greatest female voice South Africa ever produced. She became a global superstar, the first African woman to win a Grammy, and the world crowned her Mama Africa. But at the peak of her career, she made one decision, one mistake that turned her into a rejected woman, a woman without home, a double exile, and in the end, her death became one of the most painful endings in music history. In this documentary, I will review the pain behind her rise, how her own country punished her, how America made her, then rejected her, and the final event that led to her death. Brace yourself. My name is Prince Theophilus, and this is Fame and Fallout. To understand the pains behind the rise of Miriam Makeba and how she became the most powerful voice at her time, let's go back to the very beginning. She was born Miriam Makeba in Johannesburg, South Africa in 1932. That time was already hard for the whole world. There was economic depression. People were hungry, but for Black South Africans, life was not just hard, life was designed to break them. Her father, Caswell Makeba, was a teacher. Her mother, Christina, worked as a domestic worker, cleaning for the white families. They were honest people, hardworking, quiet, but being honest didn't protect black people in apartheid South Africa. To survive, Graceland started brewing a traditional African beer called Ukombote. That beer wasn't a crime in culture. It was something African women had done for hundreds of years. But the white government created wicked laws that make it illegal, not because it was dangerous, but because they wanted Africans to buy only from government-controlled beer halls, so the government could control them and profit from them. Then one day, the police stormed their home. They found the beer and they arrested Christina. And here is where the story becomes shocking. At that time, Miriam Makeba was only 18 days old. Her mother was jailed because they couldn't pay a fine of 18 pounds. And since Miriam was still breastfeeding, the baby went to prison too. Imagine that. The woman who let her stand in front of president and shake the whole world with her voice spent the first month of her life inside a prison cell. This is how her story started. When Miriam was only 6 years old, her father died. And when her father died, everything became worse. Her mother was always working, so Miriam was sent to live with her grandmother in Pretoria in a township called Riversdale. Poverty followed her, but something else followed her too, and that was music. In that crowded home, traditional African songs filled the air. Jazz music from township filled the street, and little Miriam discovered something magical. Even when people treated her like nothing, her voice could make people stop and listen. Music became her escape and her only freedom. Miriam's voice was so special and people noticed it early. One day, she was chosen for something huge. She was selected to sing for King George VI of England during his visit. For a black girl in South Africa, that felt like a big opportunity. On the day of the visit, the children stood outside dressed in their best clothes, waiting under the rain. They stood outside for hours. They were soaked, shaking, but hopeful. Then finally, the king's car arrived. For a moment, they were happy, but what happened next shocked them. The car didn't stop. It didn't even slow down. It just drove past them like they were nothing. That day, Miriam Makeba understood something she would never forget. power does not respect you until you work hard enough for the world to enforce it. That day broke her heart, but it also planted a seed inside of her. If they won't listen to us, then I will make them listen. You see, in the late 1940s, Miriam was still very young, still trying to survive in a country where black people were treated like they were born guilty. She had already tasted poverty, already lost her father, already watched her mother struggle, and in that kind of life, many young women believe one thing: maybe marriage will fix everything. Maybe marriage will finally give me peace. Maybe marriage will finally give me a home. So when a man named James Scooby came into her life, Miriam made a decision to marry him. So they got married in 1949, and soon after, they had a daughter called Bongi. From the outside, it looked like a new beginning, but inside, it was the start of a private nightmare, because James was controlling, he was aggressive, and according to the account of her life story, the marriage became abusive. Not the kind of abuse that leaves you with one big headline, but the kind that destroys you slowly. Miriam was not just a wife, she was also becoming a singer, and in that era, that alone could trigger conflict, because some men don't want their woman to shine. They want her to be quiet, they want her to be small, they want her to live under their shadow so they can control her. So imagine this: a young Miriam Makeba who was already fighting apartheid outside was now fighting a second apartheid inside her house. And she couldn't just walk away easily, because in that time, in that culture, living a marriage didn't come with applause. It came with a shame, and people blamed the woman. People will say things like, endure it, he is your husband, marriage is like that. And Miriam also had a baby, a small girl she needed to protect. So she stayed for a while, she endured, but there was a moment Miriam finally understood something. If I stay here, I might lose myself. And if I lose myself, my child will lose her mother. And that is when she made a decision that proved Miriam was always a fighter, even before the world knew it. She walked away from the marriage, not because it was easy, but because it was necessary. After Miriam escaped her painful marriage, she became something even more dangerous. A black woman in apartheid South Africa with no husband, no protection, and a child to feed. But instead of collapsing, she did something most people can't do. She turned her pain into courage. In the early 1950s, South Africa had a music scene that was bubbling. In townships like Sophia Town, the sound of the street was changing to jazz, marabi, kwela, African harmony, and it was becoming the soundtrack of black resistance. That is when Miriam Makeba's name started moving quietly, not on newspaper first, but in whispers. Have you heard that girl? That girl with a unique voice. That girl that sings like she's crying and smiling at the same time. Then one day, her voice landed in the front of the right people. She was noticed by the Manhattan Brothers, one of the biggest vocal groups at that time. This was like a young artist of today getting a call from a top record label, a top producer, a top global brand, and Miriam joined them, and that decision changed everything. Before the world knew her, South Africa already knew her. Her early recordings and performance made her one of the most talked about new voices in black South African culture. She wasn't just famous, she was becoming important because people didn't just hear music in her voice, they had identity. That time, music groups were mostly dominated by men, but Miriam entered that world and stood out. Not by force, not by excellence. Her voice wasn't competing with men, it was dominating the room. She became a star in Sophia Town. Sophia Town was not just a place, it was the capital of black coolness, black confidence, and black creativity. And to become a star there meant just one thing: you are the future. She rose in the exact environment that was producing legend. Even though Miriam had been recording and performing, one of her songs stood out. A song that carried joy, a song that carried rhythm, a song that felt like Africa itself, and that song was Pata Pata. Pata Pata is a township dance song. It is a song about joy and nightlife, but Miriam Makeba's presence turned it into a global symbol of African pride. At first, it was not a world hit, but in South Africa, it became a cultural sound. It was playful, it was infectious, it was African. And what made the song even more powerful was that the apartheid government wanted black people to feel ashamed. But Miriam's song made black people feel proud, and that was why she became dangerous. At this stage, Miriam Makeba's achievements were rising, but her biggest achievement wasn't money or fame. It was that she was becoming a symbol. And when you become a symbol, your enemies stop seeing you as an artist. They start seeing you as a threat. And when she was singing and rising, apartheid was watching. And when they finally got the opportunity, they attacked her. Not with bullets, not with prison, but something even worse. Miriam Makeba was finally rising after years of hunger, years of struggle, years of singing just to survive. She was becoming something rare in South Africa, a black woman with a voice that could stop time. She was performing, recording, and touring. Her name was moving in township like fire. But just when she thought her music career was about to become her breakthrough, life brought her something she didn't expect. Not a song, not a concert, but a theme. A theme that would change her destiny forever. And that theme was called Come Back Africa. And this is where Miriam Makeba's real tragedy began. To understand why this theme was dangerous, you must understand one place, Sophia Town. Sophia Town wasn't just a township. It was black freedom in human form. It was where jazz lived, arts lived, culture lived, and rebellion lived. It was one of the few places where black South Africans could taste freedom. So the apartheid government hated it because apartheid didn't just want to control black people. Apartheid wanted to break their spirits. So when Miriam's name began to rise from Sophia Town, the government was already watching. Then one day, a strange man arrived. A white filmmaker, his name was Lionel Rogerson. He didn't come like a tourist. He didn't come to enjoy music. He came like a spy. Because what Rogerson wanted to do in South Africa was illegal. He wanted to expose apartheid, to show the world the truth. And to do that, he had to pretend. He acted like he was shooting normal documentary, but secretly, he was building a weapon. A thing that would embarrass South Africa in front of the whole world. And that weapon became Come Back Africa.
We live in a world of violence. And violence has become such an important part that people judge us according to our racial characteristics because it's easy to distinguish one color from another. Because people think they can get away by playing one color against another.
Now, at this time, Miriam was a rising singer and Rogerson heard about her. He heard that she wasn't just talented, she was real. She carried Africa inside her voice. So he offered her a role in the film. It wasn't the biggest role. She played what was known as a shabin singer. Now, let me explain. A shabin was an illegal local bar because the government controlled alcohol, especially in black community. So South Africans created their own underground spaces. Music, dance, beer, and freedom. That alone was rebellion. So Miriam's character wasn't just a singer. She represented township life, the part of South Africa the government wanted to erase. And Miriam agreed to act, but she didn't fully understand the danger because at that time, she thought it's just an art. But apartheid does not see art as art. Apartheid see art as threats. In 1959, the film was invited to Venice Film Festival in Italy, and Miriam Makeba was invited too. Now, let us sing. A black South African woman who grew up in poverty, who was born inside prison walls, was now invited to Europe to walk on red carpet, to be celebrated, and to sit among global elites. That was not normal. That was destiny opening a door. So Miriam traveled to Italy, full of joy, full of pride. But behind her smile was something painful. She had to leave her daughter behind in the care of her grandmother. And she told herself, I'll be back soon. Just a short trip, just a festival, just some applause, and I'll be back home. But Miriam didn't know something. That plane ride was not just a trip. It was an escape, and she would not return home for 31 years. The Venice Festival was a success. The film got attention. Miriam got attention, and she became the first South African black woman many Europeans had ever seen. Not as a servant, but as a star. But while the world was clapping, South Africa was planning, and apartheid made a decision. If we can't silence her voice, we will remove her from the country. So when Miriam Makeba tried to return home, she discovered a cruel truth. The government had cancelled her passport just like that. No warning, no court appeal. Her passport, her identity, her right to belong was removed. Miriam became a woman without a country, a star without a home, and a queen without a kingdom. While she was still abroad, another tragedy happened. Her mother died. Her mother, Christina, the same woman who carried her in the prison as a baby, was gone. Miriam collapsed emotionally. She begged. She wrote letters. She pleaded. She said, all I want is to bury my mother. Just a few days, just to cry, just to say goodbye. But apartheid said no. They refused her. They blocked her. They punished her. And let me tell you what that means. They didn't just exile her from her land. They exiled her from her own history. They stopped her from money. They stole closure from her. This was not government. This was wickedness.
The South African government even further. At that time, I think she felt much stronger about it because she couldn't come back to come and bury her mother who had died shortly after she left.
Then the apartheid government did something even more evil. They banned her music. They removed her song from radio. Her records were pulled down. Her name became forbidden. In her home country, people could not even play her song. So Miriam Makeba became famous in the world but erased at home.
My records, for instance, have been banned since 1962 in South Africa. They don't sell them anymore. People who have them just have to play them privately and hope that nobody that shouldn't hear them hears them.
The apartheid government thought they were punishing her, but what they really did was that they pushed Miriam Makeba into the hands of the world. And once that happened, she no longer belonged to South Africa alone. She belonged to Africa. She belonged to humanity, because very soon, a man in London will hear her story. A man who will change her life again. His name was Harry Belafonte. And once Miriam entered America, her voice will become louder than apartheid ever imagined. Harry Belafonte was not just an entertainer. He was a powerful voice for black people in America, a civil rights activist, a man respected not because he could sing, but because he could stand. So when Belafonte heard Miriam's story, he didn't feel sorry for her. No, he recognized something. He saw that Miriam wasn't just a refugee. She was a weapon apartheid accidentally created. Because when a government tries to silence an artist, they can turn that artist into a global symbol. And Belafonte understood something. If this woman gets the right stage, the world will never forget her. So he made a decision. He took Miriam under his wings, and he did something that changed her life forever. He brought her into the biggest stage on earth at that time. He brought her to America. Miriam Makeba arrived in America with fear because, yes, America looked glamorous on TV, but America was also fighting its own racism. Black people were still being humiliated. They were still being denied rights. So Miriam wasn't walking into paradise. She was walking into another battlefield. But this time, she had something she never had in South Africa: a platform, a microphone, a global audience. And Belafonte wasted no time. He booked her on one of the American biggest TV shows, The Steve Harvey Show. This show was watched by millions and millions of people, and one performance could change your life. And Miriam Makeba stepped on that stage. Miriam didn't sing like American singers. She didn't sound like Hollywood. She didn't sound like anything they ever had before. Her voice carried something different: pain, pride, reading, spirit, and Africa. And when she started singing, America went quiet. Not because they didn't like it, but because they couldn't understand it. It was too pure and too raw. And when she finished, the applause was not normal. It was a type of applause that says, "Who is this woman?" That one performance changed everything. Suddenly, clubs wanted her, labels wanted her, media wanted her, and Miriam Makeba, the woman who couldn't bury her mother, became a sensation. She was now performing in New York top jazz clubs, huge halls, celebrity events, and elite parties. She became the African voice the West was obsessed with. And even though she was still hurting, life was finally giving her what she deserved: fame, recognition, victory. But Miriam did something rare, something that many people can't do. She refused to lose herself. Most African artists who enter the West try to change. They change their sound, they change their accent, they change their clothes. They start behaving like people they want to impress. But Miriam refused to do that. She sang in African languages like Xhosa, Zulu, and Swahili. And this was the message: I'm not here to become you. I'm here to introduce me. That confidence makes people respect her more, because the world always respects originals. By the early 1960s, Miriam Makeba was no longer just an African singer. She was now a global symbol, a woman whose voice had crossed oceans, a woman who could not go back home. She was living in America now, performing in big halls, meeting powerful people, walking into rooms where Black South African women never expected to enter. But behind the glamour, Miriam was still broken. Miriam needed something deeper, something human, something warm, something that could hold her at night and remind her, you are not alone. And that was when she met a young man, a hungry man, a talented man, a fellow South African. His name was Hugh Masekela. Hugh wasn't just any musician. He was a trumpet player with fire in his lungs. His sound didn't just entertain, his sound spoke. And just like Miriam, he didn't leave South Africa because he wanted to travel. He left because South Africa was choking Black talent, choking Black freedom, and choking Black dreams. So when Hugh met Miriam, it wasn't just attraction, it was recognition. It was like two exiles looking at each other and saying, you too, you lost your country too, you also miss home. And Miriam Makeba, for the first time in a long time, felt understood by someone who carried the same wound. Their love grew quickly because exile creates intense connection. When you don't have a home, you start building one inside people, and Miriam built one inside Hugh. Then in 1964, they got married, and the world loved the idea. People look at them like the Queen of Africa has found her queen. The voice has found the trumpet. The struggle has found love. They became the most admired African celebrity couple of that era. But what the world did not know was something heartbreaking is going to happen between them. Most people think love fails because people stop loving each other. Sometimes that is not true. Sometimes love fails because life becomes too heavy. And in their case, it was unbearable because Miriam wasn't just a wife, she was already an international superstar. Her career was exploding. She was booked everywhere, interviews, concerts, recordings. She was moving like a train. Meanwhile, Hugh Masekela was still climbing, still building, still trying to become the Hugh Masekela the world would later respect. So what happened? A silent problem entered their marriage. Competition. Not open competition, but emotional competition. The type that starts like this. One person is shining more. One person is getting more attention. One person is becoming bigger. And when ego enters love, peace leaves. Because Hugh wasn't living with a woman. He was living with a legend. And for some men, that is not easy. But even though they had silent struggles in their marriage, Miriam kept winning. At this time, she is about to enter an era that will change her life forever. In 1965, Miriam released an album with Harry Belafonte, An Evening with Belafonte and Makeba. This album wasn't just music, it was a political statement disguised as entertainment. And here is what made it special. Even though the title says An Evening with, it wasn't a live concert album, it was a studio album. It had 12 tracks, 5 songs sung by Belafonte, 5 songs sung by Makeba, and 2 duets. Most of the songs were performed in African languages like Xhosa, Zulu, Soto, Swahili, and many more. So what Miriam was doing was bold. She was entering America, but she refused to Americanize her sound. The album had hits like Train Song, Mobela, which became the most iconic song on the album. And Malaika, My Angel.
Malaika, nakupenda malaika, ningekuoa madiwe.
Malaika was an outstanding love song which means My Angel, I Love You. It became the origin of a popular gospel song titled My Lifetime, I Will Give God My Lifetime. This song,
My lifetime, I will give God my lifetime.
that album raised her profile massively in the US, pushed African music into American mainstream spaces, and went on to win a Grammy Award. Now, let us sing. A black woman from apartheid South Africa. Just a few years ago, she was stateless. Now she was winning the biggest music prize in the world. She became the first African woman and South African to win a Grammy. That moment was not just success, it was revenge. It was the world telling apartheid, you tried to destroy her, but she has become bigger than your country. Before we continue, my name is Prince Theophilus. I'm a career coach and a music business consultant. If you want to start a career in music as a record label executive or an artist who is looking for structure, marketing strategies, and deep secrets of the music business, send me a DM with private session, let's talk about it. Or click the link in the description right now to book a session with me. In this session, I will guide you so you can avoid every mistake in your career. My sessions are not free, but the experience will change your life forever. Now, let's get back to the story. In 1963, Miriam Makeba walked into the United Nations, not as a singer, but as a witness, a victim, and representative of millions who had no voice. The same girl that apartheid treated like garbage was now standing before the world, telling them how evil apartheid was. She spoke about past laws, brutal killings, raids, arrests, fear, oppression, and she asked the world one question that she shake her today. If you are treated like this, would you keep quiet? Her speech shook the United Nations, and that was the moment apartheid realized we didn't exile her, we exported her, and now she was going to destroy them internationally.
My country has been turned into a huge prison.
This, therefore, does not leave us with any option but to ask the United Nations to take positive action against the South African government, calling for a complete boycott on South Africa and especially the sending of arms by outside powers to South Africa. Thank you.
She was the first African artist ever that spoke at the United Nations and asked for the boycott of South Africa. I mean, it takes guts.
But Miriam didn't know something was coming. Something personal, something unexpected, something that would cause her the biggest backlash of her career. In 1968, Miriam Makeba made a personal decision. A decision that looked like happiness, but was actually a political earthquake. She married a man named Stokely Carmichael. A strong name, a powerful name. In the black world, he was respected, but to the white America, he was feared. Stokely Carmichael was not just a civil rights activist. He was one of the biggest leaders of Black Power movement. He was bold, he was radical, he was fearless. He spoke about black pride the way Miriam spoke about Africa. He didn't beg for equality, he demanded it. He didn't sweet talk oppression, he confronted it. And he later changed his name to Kwame Ture. In that era, America was already boiling. Black people were protesting. They were tired. They were angry. Some leaders preached peace like Martin Luther King Jr., but Stokely Carmichael, he preached power. So when Miriam Makeba, a global celebrity, married him, America didn't see love. America saw danger. Miriam Makeba and her husband were monitored. They were watched, tracked. Their calls were listened to. Their movements were recorded. Imagine that a woman who escaped apartheid was now being followed in America, the so-called land of the free. And Miriam must have realized something terrifying. I ran away from one monster and entered into the hands of another monster in suit. Now, let's pause and reflect, because this is what made this chapter emotional. Miriam did not marry Stokely Carmichael because she wanted fame. She already had fame. She married him because she believed in him, because she saw herself in him, a fighter, a voice, a rebel, a woman being who could not pretend. But the system did not care about her heart. They care about control. So they punish her for her decision. They punish her for her love. And that is when Miriam Makeba realized something painful. Sometimes you can be the most talented woman in the world, but one decision can make them treat you like you are nothing. Eventually, the pressure became too much. Miriam and her husband could no longer stay in America. Every door was closing. The air was becoming heavy. And it was clear America had rejected her, so they left. Not because they wanted to leave, but because they were forced to. And that is how Miriam Makeba became something even worse than exile, a double exile. South Africa rejected her. Now, America rejected her too. She had become a global citizen with nowhere safe to stand. After leaving America, Miriam and Stokely went to Guinea in West Africa, and Guinea welcomed them with honor. The president treated them like heroes. Miriam Makeba was given respect and protection, but still, a new country can never replace your homeland. Even though the people love you there, the pain of exile remains, because exile is not about location. Exile is about belonging. It's about waking up and remembering, my real home does not want me. So even though Miriam survived, this chapter broke her career in one major way. She lost her American momentum. She lost her commercial success. She lost the easy money. She lost the Western machine that promotes superstar. And that is the painful part. She chose truth, and truth is expensive. Miriam Makeba's downfall in America wasn't because she made a mistake. It was because she married a man that couldn't be controlled by the system. This was not just marriage. This was protest. This was rebellion. This was war. And the system responded the only way it knows how to. They didn't shoot her. They didn't arrest her. They didn't kill her. They simply closed every door, because sometimes the deadliest weapon isn't a bullet, it is silence. But this was not the end of Miriam Makeba. This was only the beginning of her deeper suffering. In Guinea, Miriam's life changed. She wasn't only performing music again, she also became a political voice, a representative, and a symbol. She worked with Guinea government, and soon she was appearing on global stages again, not just as a singer, but as a revolutionary woman, and the world respects her. This is where her story becomes sad, because the marriage that brought her to Guinea started falling apart. She and Stokely Carmichael were powerful together. They looked like a revolutionary couple, but behind closed doors, it wasn't easy. They were both fighters, both strong-willed, both dealing with pressure, both carrying heavy trauma. And the truth about exile is this: exile can kill love. Because when two people are drowning, they start pulling each other down. So in 1979, their marriage ended, they divorced, and Miriam was alone again. After all she had suffered, she had to wake up and face a life without a partner. And as a woman, this kind of loneliness hit deeper, because Miriam wasn't only a global icon, she was still a human being, still a mother, and still a woman who wanted peace. At first, Guinea felt like heaven, but politics doesn't stay stable forever. After Guinea presidents died, everything changed. A new leadership came, a military atmosphere entered, fear returned, uncertainty returned, and suddenly, Miriam was once again living in a place where anything could happen. Not because she was guilty, but because she was visible. When you are visible, you are always at risk. So even in Guinea, her peace never lasted. And not only that, she had a news from South Africa, and that news became the worst news of her life. In 1985, something terrible happened to Miriam. Her only daughter, Miriam Makeba, the girl Miriam had with her first abusive husband, the girl she carried through hardship, the girl she tried to protect from apartheid, the girl she couldn't even raise normally because of exile, passed away. Bongi died of complication of pregnancy after premature labor or miscarriage. She was only 35 years old. And when Bongi died, something inside Miriam cracked. Because remember, Miriam's mother died when she was stranded abroad. She was not allowed to attend her funeral. But fate was repeating itself, but in a more wicked way. This time, it was her own child. Her only child was gone. During those darkest years, Miriam described herself with something that shocked the world. She said she looked like an ant and saw herself small, but strong enough to carry weight bigger than her body. And she looked at the stream and saw herself flowing past through obstacles until the obstacles become smooth and disappear. That line is not poetry. That is pain speaking. That is survivor speaking. That is a woman saying, you can block me, but you cannot stop me. Now, after losing her marriage, after losing her daughter, after sickness, after emotional breakdown, a normal person will retire. A normal person will disappear. But for Miriam Makeba, she didn't stop. In 1987, a white American singer named Paul Simon came with an offer that sounded like a blessing, but turned into a global storm. Paul Simon had just released an album called Graceland, and that album was special because it wasn't just American pop album, it had African sound, African rhythm, and African spirit. He worked with Black South African musicians, and the world loved it. The album became huge, international and Grammy level. But there was a big problem. Paul Simon recorded part of the album with South African musicians linked to South Africa at the time of a heavy boycott. At that time, the world was fighting apartheid in a very strategic way. There was something called cultural boycott, meaning if you support apartheid South African business, music, show, or collaboration, you are supporting oppression. The idea was simple: starve apartheid, block them, cancel them, isolate them so they can collapse. This boycott was not a joke. It was one of the strongest weapons the world was using against apartheid. And Miriam Makeba, she wasn't just a supporter of the boycott, she was one of the biggest symbols of it. She was literally exiled because of her activism. So when the world heard Paul Simon was doing Graceland, many activists were already angry. But because they heard Miriam Makeba had agreed to join the tour, it became a hurricane. This is the part that hurts. Miriam Makeba didn't just face backlash from the white people. She faced backlash from the struggle community, from activists, from the people who claimed to love her, from the people who believed in her. Suddenly, people began to whisper, Miriam Makeba has sold out. She had betrayed the ANC. She is a hypocrite. She fought the boycott. Now she had joined the boycott breakers. And some people didn't even whisper. They said it loudly. They wrote it in papers. They attacked her publicly. This was not just criticism. It was character assassination. And Miriam Makeba was forced to defend herself. The Graceland tour began. It was held in Zimbabwe in 1987.
They call her Mama Africa, the queen of South African music, Miriam Makeba.
It was massive, big venue, big crowd, big press, big money. But Miriam Makeba didn't go there as a background singer. She went there like a message, like a reminder, and like a warning, because whenever she performed, she didn't just sing, she spoke. She used those concerts to keep apartheid in the news, to remind people this is not just music. My people are bleeding. My country is still in chains, and here is what happened. The same controversy that tried to destroy her actually made the apartheid discussion louder. People debated it. People fought it. People argued about it. And by arguing about it, they kept apartheid in the world lips. Miriam Makeba's face became global again. Miriam wasn't alone on that tour. Her ex-husband, her fellow South African legend, Hugh Masekela, also joined. And that added another layer. Because this wasn't just a Paul Simon project anymore. It became a moment where South African voices were entering global stages again. It became Africa speaking back through reading. Miriam's career had been unstable for years, not because she wasn't talented, but because politics kept burning her opportunities. The Guinea chapter damaged her Western commercial momentum. Her blacklisting in America damaged her money. Her exile stopped her from building steady fame like other stars. But Graceland returned her to the center of global attention. It built her relevance. It reminded the world that Miriam Makeba is still alive. She is still singing. She is still Africa's voice. And with that renewed spotlight, her career started rising again. More performances, more record deals, more interviews, more documentaries, and Miriam Makeba was back. For 31 years, Miriam Makeba lived like a ghost. The world knew her name, but she had no home. She performed in New York, in London, in Paris. She won awards. She shook the world, but inside her heart, one thing never left her: South Africa. Because no matter how far you travel, exile will always remind you you are not where you belong. Then finally, in February 1990, something happened that changed history forever. Nelson Mandela was released from prison after 27 years behind bars. Mandela stepped out and the whole world screamed. But while the world was celebrating, Mandela made one important decision. He didn't think about politics. He didn't think about pain. He thought about sacrifice. He thought about people who suffer for freedom. And one of the first people Mandela called was Miriam Makeba, the woman apartheid rejected, the woman they cancelled, the woman they made homeless. Mandela sent a message that was simple but powerful. come home. Now let us sing. A woman who left as a young singer, now returning as a legend. When Miriam Makeba stepped on South African soil again, it wasn't just homecoming, it was a victory. It was the country finally admitting we were wrong. She didn't return with anger, she returned with dignity, because Miriam wasn't just Mama Africa, she was now Mama Forgiveness. And as she looked at her land again, she must have realized something. Apartheid tried to exile her, but instead, they made her immortal. After 31 years, South Africa didn't just welcome back a singer, they welcomed back a hero. But just when she was about to enjoy her home, something tragic happened. The story of Nelson Mandela is another important story that needs to be told. If you want the documentary of the life and death of Nelson Mandela, let me know in the comment section. If you have not subscribed to this channel yet, please do. Our goal is to hit 100,000 subscribers before the end of February. So please take a moment to subscribe and also turn on the bell button so you'll be notified whenever we release a new video. On the 9th of November 2008, Miriam Makeba was in Italy again for something she had always stood for: justice. She was performing at a concert in support of a brave journalist and anti-mafia activist, a man haunted for speaking the truth. Even at 76 years old, Miriam Makeba chose the side of the truth. That night, she walked onto the stage, not like a weak old woman, but like a warrior, and she began to sing. She performed the song the whole world knew her for, the song that turned her from a local African singer to a global superstar. The song was Pata Pata. Imagine that moment. The same woman who was once rejected by her own country, now singing the world favorite African song in front of a crowd in Italy. It was like the universe saying, before you go, sing it one last time. And Miriam sang it. She sang it with the strength of her whole life. Then, after she finished, something happened. In front of the crowd, Mama Africa collapsed. Yes, right there on stage. She was taken away for emergency help. The doctors tried everything, but then the world received the saddest news ever. Miriam Makeba was dead. She died on the same day, 9th of November 2008, right there in Castelvolturno, Italy. The cause of her death was a heart attack. She collapsed right where she belonged, on the stage, with a microphone, with a message, and with purpose in her spirit. She didn't die while chasing money, she died while serving a cause. And here is a lesson of Miriam Makeba's story. The world may take away your home, they may take away your passport, they may ban your voice, but when your purpose is pure, you become unstoppable. Miriam Makeba did not just die, she rested after giving everything, after paying the full price, after singing her final note.
In the early 1990s, there was a phone that everyone wanted to use. Every young person, every business owner, every student, and even village elders had that phone in their hands. And that phone was Nokia. It was strong, it was simple, and it was everywhere. Nokia dominated more than 40% of the entire mobile phone market. In some countries, it was over 60%. But in less than 5 years, this giant company collapsed. A company worth over $300 billion lost everything. This is the story of how Nokia rose, how Nokia ruled, how Nokia failed, and the powerful business lessons we can learn from their mistakes.